The law office of Patterson and Associates looked exactly like it had when Dad first brought me here on my 18th birthday, 5 years ago. The same heavy curtains, the same intimidating mahogany conference table, the same portrait of Mr. Patterson's grandfather, who founded the firm in 1932. But everything else had changed. I sat at the far end of the table, alone, while Victoria, my stepmother of 3 years, held court at the other end, surrounded by her adult children from her previous marriage. The perfect breathing widow in her designer black dress and strategically dabbed tears. "Let's begin," Mr. Patterson said, adjusting his reading glasses. "I noticed you wouldn't meet my eyes," which was strange considering he'd been Dad's lawyer and friend for 20 years. Victoria's son, Marcus, smirked in my direction. "Don't worry, Patterson. We all know why we're here." Dad made his choices clear. Dad. The way Marcus said it made my stomach turn. He'd known my father for 3 years, yet he claimed the title like he'd earned it. "Yes." Victoria dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. "Robert was very specific about his wishes. I thought about the last time I saw Dad, 2 months before his sudden heart attack. We'd had lunch at our favorite diner, the one Victoria refused to step foot in because it wasn't appropriate for someone of her status. "Trust the process, sweetheart," he'd said, squeezing my hand. "Sometimes things aren't what they seem." At the time, I thought he was talking about my recent job rejection. Now, watching Victoria's theatrical performance, I wondered if he'd meant something else entirely. "I have here," Mr. Patterson began, pulling out a document, the last will and testament of Robert James Harrison, dated 1 month before his passing. Victoria straightened in her chair, her red-soled shoes tapping impatiently against the floor. "Before I begin," Mr. Patterson continued, "I should note that this will supersede all previous versions." "Yes, yes," Victoria waved her hand dismissively. "Robert and I discussed everything thoroughly. He wanted to ensure his new family was properly provided for." New family. The words hit like a slap. I thought about the photos Victoria had already removed from the mansion walls. Pictures of Dad and me, of my late mother, of our life before Victoria swept in with her designer wardrobe and social climbing ambitions. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat and began reading. "I, Robert James Harrison, being of sound mind." I tuned out the legal jargon, focusing instead on the family portrait Victoria had commissioned last Christmas, her dad and her 2 children. I'd been conveniently scheduled to work that day at the hospital where I was doing my residency. And to my daughter, Emma Harrison, Mr. Patterson's voice cut through my thoughts. Victoria's smile widened. "Here it comes. I leave my gold watch, given to me by my father, and my sincere wishes for her future happiness." The watch. The same watch Dad wore every day, the one Victoria had already misplaced during her thorough reorganization of his belongings. "That's it," I whispered, more to myself than anyone else. "Oh, darling," Victoria's voice dripped with false sympathy. "Your father simply wanted to ensure his legacy was properly managed. Surely you understand, with your tendency to waste money on public hospital work instead of private practice." Her children snickered. Even Mr. Patterson shifted uncomfortably. "The remainder of my estate," he continued reading, "including the family business, properties, and all financial assets, I leave to my beloved wife, Victoria Harrison, to manage and distribute as she sees fit." Victoria stood up, smoothing her dress. "Well, that's settled then. Emma, dear, I'll have someone drop off the watch, if we find it. Now, Mr. Patterson, about transferring those offshore accounts." "Actually," Mr. Patterson interrupted, reaching into his briefcase, "there's one more matter to discuss." "What more could there be?" Victoria frowned. "That was Robert's final will." "Yes, it was," Mr. Patterson agreed, finally meeting my eyes. "However, I'm not here today just as Robert's lawyer. I'm also the executor of the Harrison Family Trust, established by Robert Harrison Sr. in 1985. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "What trust?" Victoria's voice lost its musical quality. Mr. Patterson pulled out another set of papers, these ones older, yellowed at the edges. "The trust that holds the controlling interest in Harrison Industries, all international assets, and the majority of the family fortune. A trust that, as of Emma's 30th birthday next month, transfers completely to her control." The sound of Victoria's champagne glass shattering against the floor echoed through the suddenly silent room. Sometimes I realized watching Victoria's perfectly composed face crumble. Karma doesn't need help. Sometimes it just needs patience. And Dad, it seemed, had planned this moment perfectly. This is impossible. Victoria's voice had lost its cultivated softness, taking on a shrill edge that bounced off the office walls. Robert would have told me about this trust. Mr. Patterson carefully arranged the trust documents on the table. The Harrison Family Trust was created with specific conditions. Only blood descendants of Harrison Sr. could know of its existence before the designated transfer date. I thought back to all those mysterious meetings Dad had with Mr. Patterson over the years, the quiet conversations that stopped when Victoria entered the room. The pieces were finally falling into place. But the company, Marcus stuttered, his earlier smugness evaporating. Dad, I mean Robert, he was training me to take over. He was teaching you the operations, Mr. Patterson corrected. But ownership and control are different matters entirely. My hands trembled as I reached for the documents. The numbers made me dizzy. International properties, investment portfolios, controlling shares in multiple companies. The public face of Harrison Industries was just the tip of the iceberg. The trust holds 75% of Harrison Industries' voting shares, Mr. Patterson explained, along with significant holdings in real estate, technology investments, and offshore accounts totaling approximately. Stop. Victoria slammed her hand on the table. This is clearly a mistake. Robert changed his will a month ago. He wanted me to manage everything. He left you what he personally owned, Mr. Patterson said calmly, but the trust assets were never his to give. They belonged to his father, who designated them for his grandchildren. In this case, his only grandchild, Emma. Victoria's children sat in stunned silence, their dreams of inheriting a fortune, of controlling one of the city's oldest family businesses, crumbling before their eyes. I've managed that company for 3 years. Victoria's voice turned dangerous. I've made connections, signed contracts. As an employee, I found myself saying, surprising everyone including myself. Dad let you play CEO, but he never gave you ownership. Now I understand why. Victoria's eyes narrowed. What exactly are you implying? The trust requires annual audits, Mr. Patterson interjected, pulling out more papers, including investigations into all major business decisions. We have some concerns about recent contracts, particularly with companies connected to your previous husband's family. The color drained from Victoria's face. You've been funneling contracts to your ex's companies, I realized aloud. Overpriced services, kickbacks. Dad knew, didn't he? That's why he changed his will at the end, to make you think you'd won while the trust protected everything important. You can't prove anything, she hissed. Actually, Mr. Patterson said, the trust's investigators have compiled quite a detailed report. Would you like to see it? Victoria grabbed her designer purse, her hands shaking. This isn't over. I have rights as his widow. You have exactly what Dad gave you. I stood up, feeling stronger with each word. The mansion, your jewelry, the cars. Enjoy them. But Harrison Industries and all its assets belong to the trust. To me. You. She laughed bitterly. The girl who works at a public hospital? You know nothing about running a business empire. I smiled, remembering more of Dad's cryptic comments over the years. His insistence that I learn about the business even while pursuing medicine. The weekend meetings he called father-daughter time that always seemed to involve visiting company sites or reviewing financial reports. Dad taught me everything I needed to know, I said quietly. While you were busy redecorating the mansion and planning charity galas, he was preparing me. I just didn't realize it then. Mr. Patterson nodded approvingly. The trust includes provisions for a transitional period. I'll continue as legal counsel, and the board of directors will remain in place to ensure stability. Victoria's children started whispering urgently to each other, no doubt calculating what they could salvage from this disaster. You have until the end of the month to vacate the CEO's office, I told Victoria. The board will announce the transition next week. You can resign gracefully, or we can discuss those contracts with the SEC. Your choice. She stared at me for a long moment, perhaps seeing me clearly for the first time. Gone was the knave stepdaughter she dismissed so easily. In her place stood her late husband's heir, backed by generations of Harrison business acumen and a watertight trust. You planned this? She accused. You and Robert, you planned this all along. No, Victoria, I picked up my father's gold watch, which Mr. Patterson had somehow recovered and placed on the table. Dad planned this. He just needed me to grow into it. As she stormed out, her children trailing behind her, I caught a glimpse of our reflections in the window. I was sitting in Dad's old chair, wearing the simple blue suit he'd always said looked professional, while Victoria's designer outfit disappeared into the shadows. "Your father would be proud," Mr. Patterson said softly. He knew exactly what he was doing, protecting both you and the company. I fastened Dad's watch around my wrist, feeling its familiar weight. "So, Mr. Patterson, shall we begin reviewing those contracts? I believe we have some changes to make. Sometimes the best revenge isn't in the big reveal, it's in what comes after, and I had a family legacy to protect." 1 month later, I stood in my father's former office, now my office, on the top floor of Harrison Industries headquarters. The space had been transformed from Victoria's gilt and crystal showcase back to its original state: warm wood paneling, comfortable leather chairs, and most importantly, the old photos back on the walls. My mother's smile beamed from one frame, a picture taken at the company's holiday party 20 years ago. Next to it, a photo of Dad teaching me to ride my first bike. These weren't just decorations, they were reminders of why I was here. A knock at the door interrupted my nostalgia. "Miss Harrison, the board is ready for you." Taking a deep breath, I grabbed the portfolio I prepared. This would be my first board meeting as CEO, and I knew exactly what to expect. Victoria had made sure most board members were her allies, wealthy friends who'd gotten comfortable with her way of doing business. The boardroom fell silent as I entered. 12 pairs of eyes watched me, most of them skeptical. I recognized Victoria's country club friends, the golf buddies, the charity gala regulars. "Good morning," I said, taking my place at the head of the table. "I appreciate you all being here for this transition meeting." "Ms. Harrison," Charles Wellington IUI spoke first, exactly as I predicted. "While we respect the unusual circumstances of your inheritance, some of us have concerns about your experience level." I opened my portfolio. "Those concerns are exactly why I called this meeting, Mr. Wellington. Shall we discuss the Anderson construction contracts first, or would you prefer to start with the offshore account discrepancies?" The color drained from his face. Several board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "I've spent the past month reviewing every major decision made in the last 3 years," I continued, distributing documents. "The trust's investigators have been quite thorough. Mr. Patterson, would you like to explain the legal implications?" Mr. Patterson, sitting to my right, cleared his throat. Several contracts appeared to violate SEC regulations regarding conflict of interest and proper disclosure. The kickback schemes alone could result in significant penalties. "This is outrageous," Wellington sputtered. "You can't just come in here and make accusations." "These aren't accusations," I corrected him. "These are documented facts, facts that could lead to criminal charges for everyone involved." I paused, letting that sink in. "However, I'm offering an alternative." The room was dead silent now. Even Wellington's usual arrogance had deflated. "Immediate resignations from all board members involved in these schemes," I said calmly. "In return, Harrison Industries won't pursue legal action. You'll be replaced by qualified professionals who understand that this company's success doesn't come from country club connections." "You destroyed decades of business relationships?" someone asked. I thought of Dad, of how he'd built this company on innovation and integrity before Victoria's influence began corrupting it. "I'm not destroying relationships," I replied. "I'm rebuilding them, starting with our employees." I pressed a button, and my assistant opened the doors. Sophie Chen, our head of R&D, entered along with James Martinez from engineering and Dr. Sarah Williams from our medical technology division. All brilliant professionals who'd been consistently overlooked during Victoria's reign. "Meet your new board members," I announced, along with representatives from our international offices who'll be joining virtually, people who actually know our business, our products, and our potential. Wellington and his friends exchanged glances, realizing their power base had crumbled. One by one, they stood and walked out, leaving their resignation letters behind. Letters my lawyers had already prepared. As the new board members took their seats, I saw something I hadn't seen in this room for years: genuine enthusiasm for the company's future. "Now," I smiled, "let's discuss our actual business. Sophie, tell us about the new medical technology prototype." Hours later, back in my office, I reviewed the day's events with Mr. Patterson. That went better than expected, he admitted. Your father would have handled it exactly the same way. Speaking of handling things, I said, has Victoria accepted the settlement offer? He nodded. She'll keep the mansion and a reasonable monthly allowance in exchange for signing away any claims to company involvement. Her children have also agreed to stay away, though Marcus tried to negotiate for a position until we mentioned those questionable expense reports. I looked out at the city skyline, the same view Dad had enjoyed for decades. Has the hospital board approved the new partnership? Yes, the Harrison Foundation will fund a new wing for low-income patients, exactly as you proposed. It's a perfect blend of business and medicine, just like you. A notification popped up on my computer. Victoria had been seen clearing out her remaining items from the executive floor. According to security, she'd stopped to stare at the new company motto I'd had installed in the lobby. Harrison Industries, built on innovation, guided by integrity, dedicated to progress. The words Dad had lived by, the principles he taught me, and the legacy I would protect. I touched his watch on my wrist, its steady ticking a reminder of time's constant forward motion. The past month had transformed me from a doctor who happened to be a Harrison to a CEO who happened to be a doctor. But maybe that's exactly what the company needed. Someone who understood that true success wasn't measured in stock prices alone, but in the lives we improved along the way. Time to get back to work, I said, pulling up the new medical technology proposals. We have a company to rebuild.